Thank you for joining Effortless Attraction. My name is Evelyn McAleer. I'm the author of A Life You Want, Effortless, and The Woman's Journey. I'm a life coach, business mentor, and inspirational speaker. And my greatest value is making a difference in people's lives. So I hope through these podcasts, I can make a difference to your life.
Effortless Attraction podcast is sponsored by Colette Leeson Interview and Career Coaching. If you dream of landing your ideal job, consider Colette's services. With a success rate exceeding 90% among her interview clients, Colette offers personalized career guidance and interview coaching discreetly, both online and in person. She also conducts workshops and provides career advice talks. For further details, visit ColetteLeeson.com.
So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back for this wonderful introduction. Born in 1962, raised in a hard-working Scottish household, Fiona Hird is the eldest of three, shaped early by grit, resilience, and a deep sense of contribution. From staging garden plays to raise money for charity as a child, to working multiple jobs as a teen to support her family and fund her education, Fiona has always been driven to give back. She studied sport, therapeutic recreation, social work, and business. And along the way, life has brought her love, heartbreak, motherhood, trauma, and transformation. She's raised four incredible children and adopted a fifth, and even rebuilt her own home, literally from the shell of an old dairy. A survivor of abuse, loss, and near-death moments, Fiona has never stopped growing. She's a mother, a carer, a builder, and a believer in sharing the real, messy, beautiful truths of life. Ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome to Effortless Attraction today. And Fiona, I am delighted to have you on the show. You're most welcome.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Well, that is some introduction. No business mentioned in it, all personal stuff.
It is a lot of personal stuff, isn't it? Yes, I've had a very interesting life so far. I'm hoping to have another 20 years interesting life. I've got lots of plans I still want to realise.
Yeah, there comes a stage in life, where it's like, when you take a look back and think, my gosh, I have done so much. Mm-hmm. And our paths have only recently crossed. Mm-hmm. And it was through a conversation about something else, business related. And you shared something with me and I thought, I want this woman on a podcast show. I didn't want to know any more than what you had told me. So this is going to be all brand new to me. But Fiona, I am going to start with why you're here, why I felt you're here. But I know there's much more to hear from you as well. You told me that, you had your four kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you adopted a fifth. So I was curious to know, how did you end up adopting a fifth child? And then you went in to explain it. So for the listeners of the show, could you briefly explain to us how you ended up adopting a fifth child?
I will do. Well, it was very interesting. I worked for a charity, FAB, at the time, working with disabled young people. And through that charity, I got a referral, a very strange phone call one Sunday afternoon from a lady who'd brought this boy from the Republic of Georgia for life-saving spinal surgery. And it was a message I picked up on my phone, and it was very intriguing, for want of a better word. She just said, I've got this boy and he's paraplegic. He's been over here for surgery. I really want him to meet other young people. Can he come to your youth clubs? And then she finished the call and laughed and said, oh, and I completely forgot to tell you that he doesn't speak a word of English. And of course, I came off the phone thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do with this lad? So, I phoned her back and started the conversation, and he came to our house. I introduced him to my children because I couldn't really take him to the youth club, and he came to my home, which was accessible, and he whizzed about in his wheelchair, and I thought, God, this boy's got talent, because I'd worked in sport for disabled people, so I could see that he had potential to be a top athlete, really. So we helped her by having him one weekend a month for a year and a half. And then he had to go back to the orphanage in Georgia. And we all missed him. The other children all missed him. So we all spoke about it as a family, said, how do you feel about adopting him? So that's how it came about. And we went across to the orphanage and saw where he was staying, and went out on a lake. I remember all of us on pedal boats and people coming down and saying, you can't take a disabled boy out on a pedal boat. And we were, well, of course we can. We can do anything. So, so that's how it came about. And then we went through the whole process. It was the first international adoption between Scotland and Georgia. And it only took 2 years. I mean, a domestic adoption can take as long, but it was 2 years. It was an interesting process. And he came here when he was 14. So, yeah, he started here, started school here, and now he lives independently. He's got his own flat, his own car. He drives a car with hand controls. Still plays wheelchair basketball. He played wheelchair basketball for junior GB when he was younger. He's now 23. And yeah, he's a character, to say the least.
Isn't that amazing? But I suppose, listen, not everybody could take on all of that. A child first with a disability, it does not speak English.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go back. You were a development officer with the British Sport Association for Disabled Champion Athletes from, you put here, from grassroots to Paralympic podiums. So you were well mastered in this at the stage, Fiona.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first job. I absolutely loved it. When I worked in America for a while, when I was a student at uni doing sports studies, I went to work in California, and I was very fortunate to do that for 3 summers. But it was with young people, children who had additional needs, but also were living in poverty. It wasn't like the rich camps. So I had that background, and I came over and thought, I want to do something here for disabled young people. I don't want to do leisure management. I want to do something that's a bit different. So I got that job. It was my first job, and it was quite a big job. Everything from getting disabled people into the marathon, the London Marathon, all sorts of things. But yeah, I could identify somebody who had a talent, and all the governing bodies of sport here wanted David as soon as he was over. He just was so talented, what he could do with a wheelchair, so quick to learn. You have to be quite brave as well. If you take part in wheelchair basketball or any of these sports, it's quite physical. You know, he spent an awful lot of time on the floor. But and as a mum, I've got to be honest, we didn't treat him any differently. My whole attitude to disability is we didn't treat him any differently. I remember one day when the social worker came in to do an assessment, and David was doing his usual, Mum, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And the social worker's standing looking at me, and I turned around at David and I said, David, you've got wheels, you're quicker than me, go and do it for yourself. And I could see her looking at me as though, oh, right, okay. But David was very much brought up that, you know, you can do any sport. Literally, I hate to say it sounds terrible, but we would go all swimming. We liked wild swimming before it was a thing. And David would be in there with the rest of us, you know. But yeah, there isn't anything that he hasn't done. The year and a half he was here, we got him into every sport we could. We took him swimming for the first ever time, and it was a bit of an experience as well. But yeah, I suppose it just became, it was a natural thing for me, I suppose. You know, I know a lot of people, you're right, couldn't do it, but...
No. But you said you could see potential.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas where other people couldn't see, that's a gift. You could see potential, even though somebody did not have the ability of their legs or maybe arms.
Yeah.
I can see the potential in this person. Can I ask the question then? So it was 14 when you first saw David, and then he was returning to an orphanage. What age was he in the orphanage from?
All right. So no, I met him when he was 10. So he stayed with us in the UK and came here one weekend a month from the age of 10 till about he went back when he was nearly 12. And he had his operation, had to wait for him to get his operation when he was 10. But he fell from a window when he was 2 in Tbilisi. And the way he fortunately landed on his legs, obviously, and it was his legs, and he ruptured his spleen, he broke his arms. Even his arms were like an arch shape. He'd never been repaired properly, he'd never had operations. He'd been used for begging in the streets by who were street people. And he ended up, basically, I hate to say, in this orphanage where he had just really been left to die, to be honest. And it was a woman who was out there singing, doing Georgian music in all these different places, who found him. And she was a social worker. And she raised the money to basically send people over there to repair his pressure sores, because they couldn't bring him over till his body was more healed. So they did that, and then they brought him over. So he'd already had the surgery. So everybody donated their time here, and he had the surgery in Edinburgh, the big hospital there in Edinburgh. Well, it wasn't Sick Kids, it was Little France. And he had the operation there. And it was just after the operation I got the phone call. So I came into his life when he was 10. But in that space of time, yeah, he'd gone through a lot. But I suppose it's that determination he had. I think the reason that the lady who met him fell in love with him as well is he's got this smile, you know, despite everything. He was lying in this cot, you know, when he was young, in this orphanage, that saying it's orphanage, it's actually called Temi Community. It's a lot of vulnerable adults that live there. So he was one of the few children, and he just was lying in this bed, big smiley face. He's got he's very charismatic. He's a good looking lad, but he's just got this amazing smile. So yeah. But so that's when I met him. But I was 14 when he actually officially came into the UK. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what? He's so intriguing. I'd love to get chatting with him someday.
Oh, definitely.
Watch this
Definitely.
space. Hello, David, if you're
It's
listening.
funny. It's funny because there's a lady, Amira, actually, people obviously thought the same thing about his story because a lady, Amira, filmmaker, she filmed him from when she went over when he was about, I think he might have been about 8 or 9 or something. So she's filmed his life from that period of time all the way through the process up until he came here. So the whole idea was that he would edit his own film, but he hasn't done it yet. And I keep saying, when are you going to do this film, But no, he hasn't done it yet.
The ethos of this Effortless Attraction podcast is making a difference to people's lives. And I always think about positivity, positive thoughts, doing good. But you know what, Fiona? Like, what a life-changing thing that you've done for David. But I'm also quite sure David entering your life has made an absolute, is equally big a difference because, again, reading through your bio there, and again, listen, there's things you don't want to touch on, we don't touch on, whatever, but I'd read out a survivor of abuse, loss, and near-death moments.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my second relationship was an abusive relationship, unfortunately, for about 8 years. So my 2 youngest children, their father, I was in that abusive relationship for about 8 years. And, I look back at it and I think, why did I stay? I was a strong woman. I was going to work. I was a chief executive of a charity in Edinburgh. Fortunately for me, the people who managed the charity whenever I gave excuses about if I had a black eye or something, say, oh, I thought I was the worst driver in the world because I would say, oh, I just hit my face off the steering wheel or something. But I was in that for a while and I don't know why. I don't know why I stayed in it. I've part of what I've been doing, the work I've been doing on myself now is looking at that. But you do get yourself into a certain mental place, I would say, where you actually don't have confidence in yourself, don't realise that you can break out of that. I mean, I wasn't stuck in it because I didn't have money. I had my own career, I had my money, but I had 4 children to look after as well. But it got to a stage with the youngest that I thought, no, I just can't stay here in this situation anymore. So I had that. And then my near-death experience was before I had my 2 children. I had a car accident. Again, it's one of these divine interventions. It's either your time's up or your time's up, isn't it? And it's funny because I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, that I'd had this accident and I was doing, I hate to say, 100 miles an hour on a country road going home one summer's night in June, and an animal came into the road in front of me and I swerved to avoid it and I got round it and then the car literally crashed. But it was a sequence of events that basically saved my life, to be honest. Because I was going so fast and I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and I'm not saying to any of your listeners that they should wear a seatbelt, but from my point of view, I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and it was fortunate for me because I hit a hedgerow and the hedgerow ripped my passenger door off. When the car flipped over, I did a somersault in the car and actually broke my back. And then the car flipped over again and I fell out of the open door into the field. And then the car just went for miles. And then when I was lying in the field, your body kind of goes into shock. And although I was shouting and I was in the middle of nowhere, eventually this couple came running through the field and I knew I'd broke my back. So I didn't want to move and I knew I had to try and stay awake to tell her I'd broke my back. And this woman came and her husband came running up and had their torches. And I just was able to say to her, please don't move me, I broke my back. And she said, that's all right, I'm a nurse. And I just, honest to God, I just thought, all right, I can go to sleep now. I can just relax. And the next thing I remember was the big spotlights going up and me getting the big thing on the neck and the fancy thing for your back and all that and getting taken away in the ambulance. And it turned out I had broken my back. I had a compressed fracture in my back. But I literally was out of hospital within a week and doing the physio and absolutely fine. But yeah, so I keep saying, if it hadn't been for the hedgerow, if it hadn't been for the dogs, if it hadn't been for the fact that the door came off the car, if it hadn't been for I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, I certainly wouldn't be here. So, but yeah, so that was my near-death experience, and it's strange because I'll say to people, in that moment of going through at that speed through that field, through hitting that hedgerow, it must have been at 100 mile an hour. It must have been like flicking snapping your fingers. I literally remember every single bit of it. It's like your brain slows everything down. So I remember every single wee detail of that, which is strange. I always find that quite strange how your brain works.
Did you encounter any kind of half out of body experience? Because I have had interviews with people who have said they've tapped that side, but then they're back in the body again.
No, it's strange because it's funny. I laugh at some of the silly things that were going through my mind because when I was lying in this field, all I could think about is like, I've been, I've been thrown from this car, but I could still die here. Shock can kill you. I knew that. I'd done enough in my first aid and all that to know that. But I didn't want to move my legs, so one leg was tucked up behind me, and I could reach my shoe. And of course, there was no cars on this country road, but I could hear a car in the distance, and I thought, right, okay, I can hear a car coming. I'm going to throw my shoe, and I literally managed to reach my shoe, and I've no idea where I threw my shoe. But what was I thinking? That some guy driving would see a flying shoe and think, oh, right, there's somebody in the field. But no, I was more thinking about how am I going to get myself out of this situation. I think the only time actually, I was never at any near death point, I don't think, because although I was unconscious, I was soon kind of brought back round by big bright lights and some emergency service personnel. So, no, I never have had that experience. But
Well, when you just said that, how am I going to get myself out of this situation? Then you've asked yourself that again in a later point in life, in the marriage, the abusive, how am I going to get myself out of this situation? Isn't it amazing? I always think when we take a look at our lives, what keeps coming up? What keeps showing up? And then you get to stage, you know what? I'm free. That feeling of freedom, Fiona. There's definitely, we've talked about, there's a book going to come out. I'm sitting here engrossed, and that's why I love not knowing a whole lot really about people. So listen, I'm going to shift on a bit because I mean, from a young age, you have been raising money for charity. You've done plays in your back garden, and you've been a grafter and a worker and full of drive. And so charity has been a big part of your life, and you are now a CEO of a charity in Glasgow or Edinburgh.
Yes, Glasgow, but I was Edinburgh before. I moved to Glasgow a year ago.
So charity just got a hold of you.
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know why, because you're right. I was from a young age, the one that was, I wasn't the one for performing on the stage. I'll leave that to my older children. I was more the one for, being behind the scenes and organising it all and doing event planning and everything. But yeah, even from a young age, I think I was about 11 or 12 and organising everybody in the street to put on a show. And getting curtains off my mother and hanging them up and making a stage in the back garden and charging would have been 50 pence probably. And from that, we managed to raise £3 and bought a budgie and a cage for the children. So I was kind of doing daft things like that from a young age. And why, I have really no idea. I mean, my dad was involved with the church. My dad was he did a lot of volunteer work. So whether it came from my dad, I don't know. And my grandparents lived on a farm, so I used to spend a lot of time out there. And so I started working early as well. When you're working, when you're involved in any kind of farm life, you're out there delivering the milk at, age 10. Because I was a sprinter at the time, they used to put me out in the milk so I could run up the driveways with the milk and make the job a bit quicker. But no, I've always been like that. But charity work I worked in local government for a while. And so I only really joined the charity sector in late 99, 2000. And again, it was after my road accident. So just again, I suppose you take a look at yourself and think, is this what I want to continue doing? Local government was by this time into another reorganisation, and I thought, no, I want to do something different. And so yeah, I've been so fortunate. It's working in the charity sector helped me because I needed flexibility with my children, and it gave me the flexibility which the statutory sector didn't really give me. So
well, isn't that a good thing that came from the car accident also as well, because you're in the system, so to speak, and it wasn't fulfilling you too. So I know when we spoke about the other day about people about retirement or coming, when people look forward to retirement, you think, I'm not retiring, I don't even like the word. Why do you retire when you love doing something you love?
I've said this to people that I work with, I've never done a job I don't enjoy. I suppose it's also your own attitude to work, isn't it? But I've never done a job I don't enjoy. And And more so for me, it is seeing the difference you make in people. And sometimes you don't actually know the difference you're making in people. I'm thinking about all the young disabled people I've worked with over the years, in 25 years, and their parents will say to me, Fiona, you know the difference you've made taking these children abroad. The confidence they've got, the difference we see in them because they've got their friends and they're living as independent a life as possible. Yeah, I think I like to feel that I've done a wee bit, yes.
Well, for anybody listening here, to squeeze everything that you have done and achieved into a half an hour podcast, it's going to be slightly impossible. But I want to get as much as I can orange. I want to squeeze as much out of it. Now, you had this thought in your head, and I'm a big one for manifesting, but it also takes action. So the thought was, I'd love to design and build my own home. So there's a thought. And sometimes in that we resistance of, but how? How much money it's going to take? How many builders? But you built a big house, designed and built from an old dairy.
Yeah. Yes, very proud of that. That was me partly building myself, though, and building my own foundation, I think, because I'd had such crap up until then. So I thought, but how that came about, I agree with you. I mean, back in the day, mind mapping, manifesting, visualization, all that stuff, I didn't know anything about it. And in 2000, I went to a weekend retreat thing, or a weekend event through in Glasgow. And it was Jack Black who was doing a whole program, and it was on the stage, hundreds and hundreds of people at it. But one of the things you had to do as part of that process was to visualize and learn how to visualize and mind map and everything. But also at the end of it, you had to think about something, a dream out there that you most likely will never achieve. But, just put it in there, as you say, manifest, get it in the head, and who knows. So in 2000, it's funny because I found it about a month or so ago, there was your immediate thing you wanted to change, your middle thing and your end thing. And for me, it was this, I'd love to design and build my own house. So that was in 2000, I wrote that down. I had no plans to design and build my own house, but in about 2006, 2007, I got an opportunity when I sold my house in Aberfoyle I was looking to buy another house. And I thought, I don't want to buy another house. I don't want to buy just the same old. So I had an opportunity I saw an old dairy and had an opportunity to build it. And asked all the family, my brothers are into building and construction. They're like, don't be so silly. But yeah, I spoke to my dad, who was always my kind of the person who always, believed in dreams and was the one that did all the work in the voluntary sector as well. And he was the only person actually, out of everybody I spoke to, said, you go for it, girl. So I did. And I treated it like I was managing any other project. I just, I did my mapping. I drew everything on a mind map. I did the whole plan about what I need to start with my foundations and who I need at what point, what I need to buy at what point, how much it's going to cost. I actually did it all to budget, did my own VAT return, and was really proud and loved every minute. I was in a digger, knocking down walls. I was doing everything.
So tell us, what was the size of the house then that you built? How many bedrooms do you have?
I can sleep 14 people in the house. Yeah.
You're planning on adopting a few more?
Now I'm at the stage. Do I want to now build a little hut for myself over there, a dementia-friendly lodge for when I get dementia, which I may well do in 20 years.
Don't be putting that one out there.
I'll build a wee one over there, and then I'll make this into a business where lots of groups can come. And like you're doing over there, Evelyn, I'll have it over here where people can come to Fee's Farm and have a wee retreat and have people like yourself working with them to motivate them to do things.
Well, there we go. And so it is. Well, that one's out there.
It is out there, yes.
It's out there. Fabulous. If that will be happening in the future at some point.
Well, hopefully.
Wonderful. It's already there. Sure, it's already created. The home is there.
Yeah.
The people are there.
Business, absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here in Effortless Attraction first. Fiona, you have a few kiddies there, and they're all doing well. Like you spoke about David, how well David has done.
Yeah.
But you also have a few celebs.
I've got Amy's my oldest, my only girl. She actually works for the BBC. She's done really well. She's hosted the Adventure Show. She's hosted Hogmanay. She set up her own business a couple of years ago. And she's now looking for her first home, actually. So she's doing really well. And Lewis followed in her footsteps. They both went into multimedia journalism because when they were small, they used to spend a lot of time together. And it was, making up plays, making films, doing all that sort of stuff. So that's what they did to entertain each other. Lewis followed in her footsteps. He works in the BBC as well. He's worked for the SFA and doing their media and Scottish Football Association. So they're both doing really well. They're in their 30s. And then I've got David, obviously, who we spoke about, who's 23. And then I have Nathan, who's 21, who actually stays with my mum in Stirling, who's got Alzheimer's. And he's done a modern apprenticeship in, well, countryside rangers, they called it, but, been out there actually getting people into the countryside. And so he's there, again, being as independent as he can be, but also helping us all out by being there for my mum overnight. So he lives in Stirling. And my youngest, who's actually abroad with his girlfriend for the first time, has actually, not that I wanted him to leave home at 17, but he was very quick to leave home at 17 to move in with his 19-year-old girlfriend. So he's very independent.
Of course, a teeny, so why not?
I'm here in this big house in my Todd thinking, what am I going to be doing with all this space?
Well, this business is going to happen, sure.
Exactly. But yeah, when they're all here and with the partners, and it's going to be a granny for the first time in November. So, there's all that stuff happening. So when they're all here, it's nice to have this space, but it doesn't happen that often, maybe 4 or 5 times a year that we all get a chance to all be together. But
well, Fiona, I'm so proud of you now, and I know we're only freshly acquainted, but I just feel so inspired, or I just feel that a full heart, when I hear your story. And I know we've only briefly, touched on the past and into the present, but when we listen to where you have been, what you have come through, where you are at now, what you have achieved, and as you say, hold on a wee minute, this is only the beginning. I have just scratched the surface. There's more to come. There's more, and I believe that.
I think it's what keeps you young. It keeps you alive. I mean, I'm 62 now, and I think I don't feel 62 like a lot of us as we get older, we don't feel like that. Okay, the body might slow down. I dislocated my knee jumping on a trampoline with my daughter 5 years ago, so I'm not as active and fit as I'd like to be. So I'm actually due my operation. So when I get my operation, that'll be me up and running again. But I'm still doing all that stuff. It's just that going out and playing football with the kids is kind of past it. Although I must say, Evelyn, I took a group of disabled young people to the Lake District about in April at Easter time, and 2 of them were like, right, okay, we want to go on this high ropes course. And I was like, okay, well, the only person that's going to go on the high ropes course with you guys is me. So I went on it, and honest to goodness, we were on it for about an hour and a half, basically suspended from these huge trees really high up, pulling myself, tightrope walking, pulling myself on skateboards, God, you name it, up in the trees, flying from one tree to another. And I was zipping it from one tree to another. I thought, I'm just getting a bit too old for this nonsense. But don't get me wrong, I came off and I thought, actually, I feel quite good. I still was able to do that with my dodgy knee. So, yeah.
How great is that?
But no, you've got to keep it active. Keep active is the thing.
That's it, is keeping active, keeping the mind young and fresh, and keep learning and doing new things. It's about enjoying life. Now you're at a beautiful stage. I think there comes a really lovely time in life where it's like, now I have this freedom. I get to enjoy it. Don't get too tied down with granny duties now.
No, I won't. Although if they're listening, they'll be saying, I heard you saying you're not going to get tied down to granny duties, Mum. I said, well, I'm looking at Evelyn and the life she's leading, and I actually think I want to go abroad and have maybe a wee place abroad that I can go to for a month in the year.
That's right. We'll get you a wee Juan, wee Jose.
Oh, who knows?
Well, tell me this before we wind up, Fiona. This book, I know it's going to come out. Have you a title in mind?
Do you know, I haven't. I've only really started doing it about maybe 3 weeks ago, and I've done my outline and all the different chapters. And it's funny, it wasn't until I started writing. I've been doing it as part of this course. I started journaling anyway, and I thought, I need to put this more into a book. So it's sounding a wee bit too serious at the moment. So I'm now going back to the stage of taking every chapter and injecting it with lots of because even some of the traumatic stories have had a funny side to them. I kind of look back and think, it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't that bad. This as a result of something bad happening to you, something else good happened. So I'm trying to go back and inject some of the humor and the funny bits to it. So I don't have a title yet, no, but I'll come up with one, I'm sure.
Well, for anybody that's on any of the social media platforms, now she'll have her business end in the LinkedIn.
Yes.
you're on Facebook there as well, but I would love to keep watching your journey, Fiona. So her surname is Hird. Am I pronouncing it correct? Hird?
Yes, Fiona Hird. It's Hird. My dad
Yeah.
was from Lancashire. I've no relation to the old actress Thora Hird, but it's the same surname. Everybody will say Hird or Hird or Hard. I mean, I get all sorts, but
Depending on the
anyway,
accent.
yeah.
And when I was just listening to you talking, I thought, now, if somebody's listening to this podcast in Australia or America,
Yeah.
you actually speak quicker than what the Irish sometimes. I know we speak quicker. I don't even think subtitles could track it, because sometimes how we pronounce it, you're like, does it sound like that?
Well, Evelyn, please don't tell me we need to do it all again, but slow.
No,
I won't ever be able to.
It's absolutely perfect. It's absolutely perfect. I love your accent. I love your pronunciation.
Well, maybe, as I say, one of the reasons we connected in the first place was I thought, I really need to learn from this woman. I look at her I look at how you present yourself on screen and how obviously honestly, and I think, God, if I could just do that and slow everything down and actually make so that people do understand me, it might help.
No, it's great. It's great. It's excitement. When you get excited about stuff and then we rush and we talk, but it's a lovely feel. And I love that it's the first time that I've heard 90% of what you have talked about today, Fiona. So I want to say thank you so much for saying yes to being on the podcast. I certainly know that it will make a difference to people's lives hearing your story, because listen, we never know what's going on behind closed doors. Myself and Jim had this conversation the other day. When we see what we see as confident women, and then you question, but how did they end up in that relationship, or why were they in that relationship? But only you know when you're in it.
That's right.
And for people on the outside, so we never know. Look, somebody could be listening to that today, and there's a woman that has just spoken and said, how am I going to get out of this? And you made the decision just to do it.
Yeah.
And no regrets.
No regrets. No, absolutely none.
And loving yourself, that has been a whole part of your journey, starting to look after Fiona, putting Fiona first, loving Fiona, because sometimes Fiona probably could come at the end of the queue.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I'll be honest, that's one of the things I've had to learn, just to say no to people, which is hard for me. I think one of the reasons I have stayed in relationships longer is that you actually try and think that if only I could get back to the person that I met, if I could support them with their addiction, if I could support them with this, if I could, and then you do realise that actually the only person that can actually help them with their addiction is them, and it does impact on everybody else. But yeah, it's not been easy, but equally, you just do what you think's right at the time. I suppose I'm one of these people that just keeps giving and giving and giving. In fact, there's a book called The Giving Tree, and I give it to people as a gift. But my son said to me not that long ago, Mum, you need to stop being the giving tree. He says, because you will just end up just as an old stump. And I'm like, well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Lou. But anyway.
Yeah, that's it. And when it's in your nature to be a giving person, sometimes the givers are very poor receivers.
That's true.
And then you only take back what you think you're deserving of, and then you question yourself, but I'm not deserving of that. But that's all going to come in this book. I know it. All your advice and wisdom of how this woman, you think whenever you get into a relationship, I'm not going to be your mother. I ain't going to be your counselor. I'm not going to be your life coach. You need to have your shit together before you come here, because I've got mine sorted.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to take that away from this today for sure. That's my therapy for today.
Well, Fiona, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to one day that we'll get to meet in person.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Whether it's in Andalusia or Scotland.
Yeah, lovely, Evelyn. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.